Hey everyone, we are back to make some more progress with Damon Claw, and with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
And in this video we are going to be adding the dialogue system in. We already have some nice new graphics made by Corey, like this really cool bitmap font and the background for the dialogue system, and then this portrait of the hero I made, and then there's, oh yeah, the other stuff that has happened since then. We got in some updated level 1 boss fight environment art, and this big blob here is a placeholder sprite that is going to eventually be the full designed animated spriter object for the level 1 boss, but since he's not designed yet, we just needed something as a placeholder to start to get the code to work for the dialogue system.
Right.
And then the other thing Corey did is removed the statues from the background here and increase their contrast and darken the shadows, and we added them instead to the extreme foreground layer, so it just adds a nice additional parallax effect and makes that environment a little more encompassing, I guess you could call it. And then, but yeah, so today what we're going to do is in general get the dialogue system working, and what's going to happen when you enter a scene or when the game enters dialogue mode, the entire score and HUD element is going to scroll up off of the screen, and then the dialogue system portion there is going to scroll down to take its place, and then whatever portraits are appropriate will appear either on the left or the right. So the behavior we want is whenever the hero speaks, his portrait will appear on the left and the text just to the right of that, and then this other portrait won't show a portrait, it'll show a button prompt animation, and then if an enemy or boss or secondary character talks to him, the portrait of the player will disappear and then in the right moments turn into the button prompt, and then there will be the text, and then the portrait of the person talking to the hero will be on the right hand side. So hero always on the left and the other character always on the right. So let's first just quickly go through the things that we've added prior to the video here. So we have just a normal tiled background object that we're using, so you can see if I double click. So it just uses a repeating pattern, and we just made it the right size. And we also, the important thing is we gave it a behavior, which is the ease tween mod. And I haven't set this out yet, but I'll set that up later. But this is going to be able to make it slide down from the top of the screen to the proper position and then slide back out of the way to make room for the HUD to reappear. And I've given that same behavior to the background for the normal in-game HUD. And then, so we have just regular sprites, which are the portraits of the characters. And so that is the default animation. Its playback speed is set to 0, and each frame will be a different portrait for different characters that will speak in the game. And then there's another animation that's called button prompt that we can switch to when we need the button prompt on that side. And there's that instance variable I created for left or right, and that's just to be able to easily control what animation or frame is being displayed. So we know whenever the hero is playing, it'll be playing frame 0 of the default animation, and yeah, and so we know we'll be doing logic like if the portrait's sprite value left to right is -1, then set it to default animation and set frame to 0 for when the hero is talking, and so on and so forth. And the same thing for the right hand side for other characters that are talking beside the hero. And oh, the other important thing is both the sprite bitmap font here, the dialogue bitmap font, and the sprites here, they have a pin behavior to it. And what pin allows you to do is anchor or stick objects to another object. So what we're going to be doing is pinning these objects to their appropriate backgrounds. So these three things will be pinned to the dialogue background, and all of these sprites and sprite fonts will be pinned to this HUD background. That way when we move the HUD and move the dialogue background, everything that should will move perfectly along with it, at least in theory. I haven't tried this yet, but that's what should happen. And I just realized there's these tiny little sprites here that I probably missed and did not give a pin behavior to yet, so we'll do that right now. So while it's on my mind, and before I explain the other few things I need to for everything we need to do today, I'm going to go to gameplay events, and we're going to add a new on start of layout event. Let's see, there's no harm putting it up there. Let's see, here's one of our core. Yeah, this is great. Okay, so right here, we are going to pin everything. So just to be a little more organized, I guess, and to not have this one event get really kind of giant and disorganized, I'm going to use the function. So I'm going to say function, and we're going to call function, and that function is going to be pin HUD.
Right. Perfect.
All right, and then so move it above function on function, and then I'm just going to paste that in pin HUD, and I'll just juggle this so it makes more logical sense in the order, although it does not matter in the actual game. But so on pin HUD, so now we just need to find all of those things that are pinned, like dialog sprite font, that has to get pinned to object, and it's going to be pinned to dialog BG, and position, and we're not changing any angles, so position only is fine. And then we're going to do the same sort of stuff to the regular HUD as well with other objects. So we're going to replace object dialog sprite font with regular sprite font, and we're going to replace the dialog BG with the pin to HUD BG. There we go. Position only. So, and then there's a bunch of other stuff we need to pin. And I think that's it. I think the dialog system only has the sprite font in the middle and the same portrait object on the other side.
Right.
So I think that has pinned everything. All right, now that we got that all set up, let's go back to level 1 boss layout. And I just want to quickly walk through all these variables I've already set up in the boss. And remember, this is just a placeholder. We do have a kind of work in progress single frame to sort of figure out his overall look and size. That will actually reveal with the code later once the code is done. But remember, it's still work in progress and subject to change. But anyway, so here we have in the first few instance variables, they're text variables that we carefully named in the same naming convention. So it's intro text 1, 2, 3, and we can add as many as we want to, depending on a given boss might be really verbose and say a bunch of stuff. So it's divided into little bits of text that will fit in the dialog box. 3 lines of text can fit at a time, and there's a button prompt animation so that it'll let you finish reading and then press a button and it'll display the next text. But in this case, for this first test, we only have text in the first variable. And then so there's also intro how many, and that's a quick way to tell the code that we're going to make how many of those intro text variables are being used, so that once it displays the first text, it knows that when you press the button, then it's done with everything that character is going to say, at least for the first time they speak. This might get more complicated over time, but for now this is good to get it working.
Right.
And then intro first is a variable that in this case we set to 1, because that means when the whole intro sequence starts, who talks first, the hero or the boss. And in this case, because the boss's intro first variable is set to 1, he starts talking first, and then it'll go to the player. And then we have hero intro 1, which is what text the hero is going to say. And I can add more hero intro 2, 3, 4, as many as we need if the hero has a lot to say in that particular dialogue sequence.
Right, yeah.
And then hero intro, hero text how many is how many different strings of text he says before he's done speaking. And the other thing we do plan on eventually, we're probably going to do this in the next video, eventually we probably want the text to appear one character at a time very quickly, but still one at a time to sort of fill in, and then the button prompt will appear. But for this video, we're just going to get the overall thing working with the text appearing all at once. All right, so to start with, let's handle one of the hopefully simplest things, which is we definitely know when the player reaches the spot where he would otherwise get his control back. Because we want a dialogue system there, we're going to go specifically into the level 1 boss events. And right here, where it currently gives the player his control back and all that stuff, we're going to change the code so it does not do that yet, but instead will initiate the dialogue system, which doesn't exist yet, and then we'll start programming in the dialogue system. So for now, I'm just going to copy this, and just to sort of keep those events, and we'll toggle disabled. And now I can just go in here and do that. So now we can call another function, and we'll call this dialogue intro. And we'll copy that, and then we'll just start a new event, and we will say function on function dialogue intro. And then so here is where we need to actually start the regular gameplay HUD scrolling up. So we will simply, hopefully it's simply, famous last words for programming. So we need HUD BG, and we need to go into its move, ease, tween stuff. Wow, it's got a lot of features in here. Let's check out its settings first. So let's go back to level 1 and click on it, and so here it is. So active on start, no. Tween property position, function ease out bounce. We definitely don't want any bounce. I think we just want ease out but with no bounce.
Wow, so many options.
Yeah, ease out.
That's amazing.
So that like quad and stuff like that, those are different forms of easing. Wow, this is like really...
I don't even know the difference between like quad and cubic. And
yeah, they're just different ways of handling the
same
curve
thing,
of
sort
the
of?
ease. Yeah, so it has a mild effect on exactly how the ease in or ease out is, like how fast the sort of ramp is, so to speak, or how much it slows down, how quickly when it starts. For now, I'm just going to pick something super simple, linear, which has no easing, basically. It's just a straight diagonal line of movement, so it's not going to ease out. Because like it's going to take some time to try them all and see which one we like. So for now, we'll just get it working. So initial is the current position, target is the target position, and then coordinate mode, relative. Let's try that for now. Force initial on start, no. Yeah, no, that's going to be the same every time. Okay. I think that's all fine, except target should definitely be 0 for X, and, oh, it's a comma, Now we'll do HUD. And we are going to start its movement. So let's see if this works. And then everything will be stuck. Whoa!
Nice.
Yeah, that should not have happened in this level at all.
Right.
Partially I know what's happening. Okay. I never set this to not be active at start.
Oh, right.
That movement. And then we've got ease out bounce, which is why it was being fancy with the bounce when it hit its final position. Oh, okay, that's the problem. If we're doing it based on relative, then it should be 0, because it's relative to its starting point.
Oh, so the target would be relative. Yeah.
Yeah. So 54 would mean go to the right 54 pixels no matter what. That was
so
the
we
other
wouldn't
issue.
want 4 pixels, because then we need to move that more than...
Great point. So yeah, it's not a coordinate, it's a how many pixels you're moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's absolutely correct. So this would be target 0, negative...
Like either 16 or
yeah, it's 16. We know it's 16
16.
pixels, so we'll do 17 just to be safe.
Right.
And then so this one, its first movement is going to be going downward. So now we need way more than 20 because it's however big its height is. Yeah. Oh, it's right here, yeah. A size, 40. Okay.
Okay.
This would be 40.
Nice.
Theoretically. Let's try that again. Okay, so that's behaving appropriately. And yeah, I didn't even notice, but the stuff is anchored as it should be. Nice. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So yeah, we have that thing. Corey realized this might be the case, that we weren't making the sprite go all the way up, because before, when we never envisioned the HUD moving upward, there was never a need to have the sky go all the way up that far, because the HUD always covered it. But now, because we want this nice transition where one thing goes up and then the other comes down, we're going to need that. So I can literally just go into select this, other, select, and that. There we go.
Nice, yeah.
So now, let's try it again. Oh, I didn't realize I was starting on this layout. Oh, did I fix it in the wrong layout? I guess I did. Yep, it's a different color. Okay, yeah. I have to do it
Although
here.
we could set it for each layout, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're doing.
Good policy.
So here, and that way it's a tiny bit of memory, but we're not wasting memory by making these objects, these images bigger. We're just setting an RGB value for the background. So again, it would just be go into layers, select background layer, select background color, other, color picker, and that top sky color. Now it'll be seamless, nice. Okay, so next step, level 1 boss events, and now we simply...
I'm wondering if, I was thinking about that intro, him walking into the boss area. Mm-hmm. Would we want the HUD there at the start anyways? Like if he walks, if we do that fade transition,
right,
we could just have the HUD already gone.
Like never there? Yeah.
Yeah, like at least in a boss fight.
Yeah. I want the overall universal behavior to function first, and then we can always override it for specific circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. We may still need this, but I'm thinking for the bosses, like I was like, it's a little weird that the HUD's there at the start, and then it kind of just goes away for a second.
Eventually I want to make this so that we can trigger a dialogue between the hero and an NPC, and like another innocent person, like a villager, right in the middle of a level or something. So if that happens, we definitely want it. So, or like, we have that thing now that stops the scrolling for sub-bosses in the middle of a level. Mm-hmm. We could do that and then trigger a dialogue between the sub-boss and the player and stuff like that. And for that, we definitely need the health bar HUD to move up out of the way. So I just want to get that general functionality, and then we can always very easily change it specifically for all boss fights or specific boss fights as we decide. Okay, so now the trick is we check the HUD BG's movement and we ask on tween end. There we go. So when it's done, then we are going to, and this is going to be a problem later because later we need to bring it back, but I just want to see if I can get this working in general. We're going to need a variable that keeps track of which HUD is coming or going, the dialogue or the other one, because when it goes up, it will have an on tween end event, and when it comes back down, it'll have an on tween end event, and we need to keep track of which is which. Right, if that makes sense. So, but for now, this is just fine because I want to get the dialogue HUD to come moving downward. So that is dialogue BG, and we're going to start its easing. So start. Okay, so now one should go up as soon as it's done getting out of the way. The other one should come down. Let's see if this works. Nice. That was snappy, huh?
Yeah.
Let's see that again. Like, of course, we can tweak the timing of everything, and but it definitely works. It feels almost too fast, but it definitely...
I think
that's why this is much taller. It's moving 40 pixels in the same amount of time. So that's what's causing that to be a bit jarring. So we can change that really easily by going back here. And we could even figure out some math if we wanted to. The layer... And then, so this is moving at 40% of a second. Yeah. So about 1 full second is proportionally about...
So you could divide by 4, basically. So that needs to move 40, so you do just 1 second.
Yeah, roughly 1, yeah. Oops, that's not 1, that's a 10th. There we go. Much closer.
Yeah, now it's a little bit slow. Yeah.
Yeah, but it feels like it's pretty much moving the same speed as the other thing, as the
Yep.
the thing going up. So I think we're good for now. This is definitely good. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is going to be, once that moves down, we're going to trigger the actual dialogue to start.
2 days later.
We are back after a couple day delay. Some other stuff came up, and I realized that night that not only was I tired as usual when making these videos, but also I was very much in the frame of mind as a visual artist that wanted to figure out how to get... Oh, and by the way, with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
But we started the video with that anyway, so I guess that was redundant. But still, it feels weird to not start like that after a couple days of not recording. But anyway, so I was thinking from a very visual point of view, trying to figure out how we want the HUD to slide up off screen and the other thing to slide down and the letters to come in one letter at a time. So I was making the actual functionality much more complicated than it needed to be, where I was putting all the variables in the boss placeholder sprite, and then there was going to be all this confusion, like how do we tell the system whose character it is to talk, and then display their portrait and their text, and set up the thing on the button prompt on the other side depending on who's talking, and then how many different bits of text each character has to talk. So after taking a break, I realized that this could be made much simpler using a much more programmer type approach to things, which is definitely what you should do when you're programming. So it's one thing to think like an artist while you're figuring out how it should behave and look, but then once you're ready to make it work, you need to switch gears if you're an artist like we are, and really think about it. And it's one of my favorite expressions is measure twice, cut once. I was trying to dive in and cut before measuring it all.
And
yeah,
too,
go ahead.
this also speaks to just in terms of all-encompassing game development.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the importance of occasionally stepping away, and your mind will still think about these things whether you like it or not after the fact. But
exactly.
you'll have that idea sometimes, not looking at the code, not staring at it.
Exactly. I highly recommend
come back to it with a fresh approach.
That's been the case almost every time in all the years I've been making stuff with things like Construct or predecessors before that, is so often the most complicated bugs, the worst thing you can do is keep slamming your head against that bug for hours and hours. The best thing to do is to just, after that's not working, just walk away, do something else, and most of the time you'll have that eureka moment where you think you're not thinking at all about that thing. And your subconscious mind the whole time has been kind of rolling the ideas around in your head. And without you even knowing, suddenly this idea just pops into your head. Oh, wow, I think I just figured out either the cause of the bug or a solution to avoid that bug in the first place. And this is one of those cases where I had stopped thinking about it, and so that like my brain was in a different mode. I wasn't fixated on trying to fix the code that I had. And that's another thing. Sometimes if you're trying to do something and it seems really complicated, don't let yourself waste a bunch of time beating your head against that wall, to use the same metaphor again. Sometimes it's well worth it, especially with something like Construct, where we're only dealing with maybe 8 or 9 events anyway. Sometimes it's worth it to give it some thought and be willing to completely remove the code you did and then just redo it from a different approach. And that's largely what I did. So to get into the point, before I had this really sloppy thing, as you know, with this whole keeping all these variables in the particular boss placeholder sprite, and I replaced it. I remembered there's this great thing called the dictionary object in Construct, which is similar to an array, very similar, and it just allows you to store data with a key name, which is like a variable name, which you can name whatever you want, and then just the data that is in that key. And I realized I just need to remind myself how to embed that data file that you create, that dictionary file, into the project so it'll work across all the platforms when we compile it out. And so that's what this is here. So what we can do is we're going to be able to create a little tiny text file for each of the cinematic dialogue scenes in the game. And then at the beginning of that level that's going to have that cinematic, we just make sure it loads in, and then it loads it into the dictionary, and then you can just access all of those variables from the dictionary. And the great thing is that, so all we did, and I actually have that program open as well, let me get to it here. So I literally created a small program to help me create the dictionary file in the first place. So amazingly enough, when you add a dictionary file into Construct, it's not very convenient in that there's no way to just click on the dictionary plugin and say edit dictionary data and just type it in, right? That would be so handy. So what I did is I created a little tiny tool in Construct that will automatically save out a dictionary file that then I can import into the project. And that way it's exactly the right proper JSON formatting, which is the data format that it uses. Not that that's super relevant for this, but anyway. So what I did is I just came up with this super simple solution. We'll just have, for every time that the dialog box is going to show something, we'll number it, and there will be left portrait value, which says what animation I should be playing, a right portrait, so it'll be left portrait 0, right portrait 0, and then text 0. And so all it's going to do is just read through that and update itself every time you press the button. It's going to move on to the next number, so then it would be, left portrait 1, right portrait 1, and text 1. It'll read the data from there, so it made it insanely clean and simple logistically, but also I made myself this little tool so I could just literally do, I think I was doing left pour for portrait just to save time 0, and then I would just literally enter in the name. So I named an animation in the sprite for the portraits, hero. So when I add that, so here we go, left pour 0 equals hero, and then I would do right portrait 0, that would be button prompt, like so, and then I would add that in. And the cool thing is, like, let's say I notice I made a typo there. If I change this back to left portrait, I've got a double T there. But once the name is the same, you'll see this button changed to update. It knows I'm not trying to create a new variable, that I want to fix that one. So then let's say it was hero face instead of hero. That was the name of the animation. I could update that. And then the really cool thing for the text, we had an issue that was really ugly. And in fact, I'm going to make it work like that again just to show what the problem was. So here's the text object, and I checked. That's why the AAAA is there. I needed to see how many characters fit on one row. And then, so originally, we had wrapping set to word wrapping, but then I actually off video made it so that it comes in one letter at a time. And it looked really terrible because if a word was at the end of one of the top 2 lines, and then it wouldn't fit because it became a bigger word because it's filling in one letter at a time.
Right.
Suddenly that half a word that was up at the top line would teleport down to the next line. And it just looked terrible. So I needed a workaround for that. So what I did, and yeah, I'll run it quickly so you can see now that I changed that. Well, you'll see in a second. I'm trying to explain too many things at once here. All right, so you'll see. Yeah, you saw you and Dare. Okay,
right.
So that's what it was doing. But you'll see otherwise I got it working, and it even exits and you have your control back and all that stuff. So I'm going to review that code after I'm done explaining this problem. But so the first step to fixing it was to switch this to be character wrapping instead of word wrapping. And then in that tool that I made for us to use, we've got these 3 lines and then push to value. So we put text 0. We can blank this out, but we don't even need to. It should replace it on its own. So let's say we're figuring out what we want to say. And I even made it limited itself to 25 characters. So now you know exactly how big you can fit. So let's say we had a word like face at the end, F-A-C-E, and I see that the E won't fit. Then I can just erase that, and then I can start with face on the next line. So it's a very nice, intuitive, visual way for us to figure out exactly how to word the 3 lines of text. So then you just push to value, and it pushes it in here, and it pads it with exactly the right amount of spacing so that it's going to be exactly how we need it, line for line, in the actual game. and then you just click add, and you can see it adds text 0, and it combines these 3 lines into the one full line that's padded with the number of spaces in between each line so that it lines up perfectly. You never have any word in pieces between 2 lines. And then you just save it out, and it saves it as a text file, and then you import the text file under Files in the actual game project. And then, so if I do need to edit, now that it exists, I could just right-click and choose Open. It'll open it in your default text editor. And then you can tweak it right in here. Like if you see a simple typo or something like that, it's all right there for you to edit if you want to. Or you could just reload it in that tool I made. And by the way, all of you guys who are actually Construct users, in the near future I will release this tool and a little video explaining exactly how to use it in the very near future. Alright, so now let me go into the actual new events and explain what is happening. So at the start of the layout, we need to use what's called the Ajax object, which is going to ask for the data from that text file that is embedded into the program. So once we do that, we then have to wait for that request to be finished, which is virtually instantaneous since it's an insanely small text file that's in the same root folder. So then we just do, once the dialog is completed, do you see how I gave it that tag dialog?
Right.
So when this is done getting the data, it triggers a thing that says, okay, dialog is completed. So when that is true, when dialog is completed, then we use the dictionary object and we load in the data from that text file into the dictionary. And then so what we're doing is if intro or exit is 1, where the character is moving, and then once the character gets far enough along, you can see we call a function. We're using the function plugin to be able to do functions, and we're calling a function that I call dialog intro. So here it is, function dialog intro. We start the HUD moving upward. That's what this does. And then let's expose this more so we can see what's going on. So HUD BG, start it moving upward. That's its default behavior. And then right off the bat, we're setting up the left and right portrait on the HUD that are currently off screen and not yet visible. We set them to the proper, you could see here, whatever the dictionary now has in its data from the text file for the first left portrait image to show, or animation, and the right portrait animation to show. We preset that up because I didn't want the big text dialog box to slide down completely empty. I thought it would be less visually appealing.
Right, yeah.
So while it's sliding down, I already want the player to immediately know who's going to be talking first. And then their text, once it's done, then the text will start filling in. It just looks a little better. So it fills in the proper animations. So now we have if coming or going is 1. That's a variable I added to the dialog box. And let's see. So you can see right at the beginning, I set coming or going to 1. So now it knows that the dialog box is going to be coming into the screen at some point. So if that's true, if coming or going is 1, so the dialog box is on its way in, and the HUD has finished moving, we know what's happening is the HUD just finished going off screen. So now we need to make the dialog box move downward onto the screen from the top. So that's what this does, because its default movement is set to go down 40 pixels from its current location, which is off screen. And then once that's done, coming or going is 1, and the dialog box is finished, that's when we change the value coming or going to 0. So it's doing neither at the moment. It's not coming, it's just there. And then we say dialog box set which text to 0. And it knows it's at the very beginning of the whole dialogue sequence, so to speak. So it's time to display the first text and the first portraits and so on. But it already has the portraits ready. So then we call the function dialog fill. And we also, in this case, to reveal the awesome placeholder boss we have, I just set the animation to intro, but obviously eventually the bosses will be spriter objects. So we can do stuff like this to trigger new animations in the character to make the dialogue more interesting and have the sprite characters actually sort of play out to some degree, to emote or to do some hand waving like I love to do at the camera when I talk. Next we have, let's see, when the button is pressed incoming or going is -1. So this comes later, so I'll skip this. I'll get back to this later. Eventually I'll reorder this in a clean way. But let's go on to, okay, so we called the function dialog fill. So here is that actual function. And what we're going to do is I created another string variable in dialog.bg, tiled rectangle object. But I created a text value or string value that we could put stuff in that is fill text. And we set fill text to whatever is in the dictionary object for text. And then you see here string dialog.bg which text. So do you remember we set which text to 0? Mm-hmm. Okay. That would be text, and then it's going to convert the number 0 to the string 0. So the full name of the key in the dictionary that it's going to get the text string from is text 0, if that makes sense. The and symbol means, so it's text and then also the number 0 converted to string 0 instead of numeric value 0. So it gets that information and it stuffs it into a string variable in the dialog box called fill text. And then also we're updating whenever this function is called. If the left or right, if you remember, we have two instances of the portrait sprite, one on the left, one on the right. And we just created a variable in it called left or right. And it's -1 to tell us it's on the left and 1 to tell us it's on the right. So if it's the one that's on the left, because its value left or right is -1, we set the animation to, and then we get it left por, right here, lpor, and then same thing, we convert the numeric value which text, so this would be 0 again, so lpor 0, it gets the name of the animation it's going to switch to from the dictionary object. Same thing for the right. And you can see this is a function. So every time we increase, when the player presses the button, and we need to increase the which text value from 0 to 1, then we switch that to 1, and then it's going to know, it's going to update the animations to lpor 1, rpor 1, and text 1. Okay, so that's a function we call nice and tidy. We call that same code every time it's time to switch over to the next thing. Okay, and this is what actually makes the text fill in one letter at a time. So every, I think that's a 20th of a second, coming or going is not -1. Length dialog bg fill. So len is the length of a string. So we're telling it to calculate how long, how many characters, including spaces. We're making it count how many characters are in that string that we put into the dialog box, which is all the text it should display now.
Right.
And we're saying if the length of the full complete text is bigger than the current number of letters in the actual sprite text object. So you can see here dialog sprite font text. So it's comparing how many characters each are displaying. And so long as there are still more characters in the full text it's supposed to display, it knows it needs to keep displaying more of those characters, right? So if that's true, and this is basically to avoid a bug, length of dialog box bg text is greater than 0, because you don't want it doing this code when the fill text value is non-existent. It doesn't have any characters in it, right? All right, so we go dialog sprite font, set text to the length of dialog box fill text, and then the length of dialog sprite font text plus 1. So what this is doing, oh yeah, left, okay. So there's the full text of everything it's supposed to put on the screen, and you can tell it, that's what the left command is for. It's only going to take so many characters, however many characters you tell it to, starting from the leftmost character. So I'm updating the amount of text it's showing, I'm adding 1, that's what the plus 1. So however many characters it's displayed so far, so it's going to start having displayed 0 on screen, no characters. But as soon as it does this, every 20th of a second, it's going to display 0 plus 1 in the first instance, so it'll have the first character. And then a 20th of a second later, it knows it's displaying 1 character so far, so it's going to add 1 to that, and it's going to display the first 2. So what it looks like it's doing is it's just adding the next character as it goes along. But really it's redrawing the whole thing, but each time 1 more character is being displayed than the previous time, until the number of characters it's displaying is exactly the same length as the number of characters that the full text has. And then each time it does this loop, it does a check. Has it displayed all of the text? And that's when we set ready, another variable I added to the dialog BG. And that means, is it ready for the next button press? And then we see here, if ready does equal 1, and one of the portraits is playing the animation button prompt. And then we have another function called back to HUD. So let's see where we call that. Call back to HUD, right? So this is happening. So B1 equals 1. Remember how we have that sort of abstracted layer that converts button presses into variable numbers so that we can have the player use a controller to play the game or keyboard or touchscreen? Mm-hmm. So B1 equals 1 means the player just pressed button 1.
Right.
So if the dialog system box knows that the text is fully displayed and it's ready for a button push to go to the next one, and button 1 is pressed, and coming or going is not equal to -1, that means it's already going back off screen, then we set the dialog sprite font text to nothing. We clear it out. We set button 1 to 2 just to be safe so this thing can't loop itself. So now it's beyond 2, so the player has to let go of the button and then press again for there to be any chance for B1 to be 1 again. And in the code, it keeps adding to B1 as you hold the button. So now we have a sub-event. So if all of this is true, and the dictionary key count divided by 3, remember we have 3 values per each time somebody says something. We have left portrait, right portrait, and the text itself. So that tells us how many times you need to push the button for new text. So if that number is greater than the dialog box, which text, that means we know that there's another text that still needs to be displayed.
Right.
So if that's true, then we set ready to 0 again, because they just pressed 1 and now we need to display the new text. And then we add 1 to which text. And remember that that value which text is the one that fills in the names. Like L portrait would now be 1 instead of 0 because we switched that value to 0. And
right.
Text would be text 1 instead of text 0. And then we call that function dialog fill, which you know all about. So that's one possibility, is that there's still text left to be displayed, like an other set of portraits and text. But what if that's not the case? What if it is the same exact number? What if which text is the same exact number as the number of times that somebody has to say something for this dialogue cinematic? In that
right.
case, you set intro or exit to 0. The player is done talking to the boss. It's time to get fighting. You give the player back his control. And again, this is the logic for the player control for all the special moves. And you clear out the text in the dialog box, and then you call that function back to HUD. Right? So back to HUD is going to do the opposite. That function is going to make the dialog box go up off screen, and then when that's done, so we'll see that here. So we'll look for back to HUD. Here it is, function on back to HUD. We set coming or going to -1. -1 means yes, we're going now. And we start the dialogue, we set it to a new behavior because its default was to go down onto the screen. Now we need it to go back up 40 pixels. So that's what this is. Target Y is -40, which is 40 pixels upward. And then we set its duration. I want it to get off screen nice and fast, so a half a second. And then we start it moving. So the dialogue text background goes up off screen. And then right here, coming or going is -1 because we just set that. And when the dialog box is finished its tweened motion, then we set the HUD BG, which is currently up off screen. It needs to move back down 16 pixels. So that's what this does. We'll make its duration really fast to let you get back into the action and see your health meter and stuff while you're fighting the boss. And we start that movement happening. And then finally, I have this event, which I didn't even add anything to, but it's when the HUD is done moving, and coming or going is -1, which it is. All I would want to do here is, just for the sake of tidiness, would be to set coming or going back to 0. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole system. And as you can see, it all works. There was one last additional feature I want to add, which I think will be really useful. And that is, you see how this right here is the player is, like we assumed most of the time the player is going to come into a boss fight on the left hand side. Usually the hero will be on the left and will be talking to someone who's talking back on the right. But what if we don't want that to be the case? What if in this game or a future game that uses the same engine, what if we want it so that the player can enter a level or a boss fight from the right-hand side, or maybe an NPC character comes up from behind him and starts talking to him, so he turns around, but that character is on the left-hand side on the screen.
Right.
So I just realized it would be so easy to just automatically build that functionality right in, and all we have to do is take this one on this side and change its size to be negative 34 instead of 34, and that flips it and obviously fix its position, oops, like so, about like that. And then that way, if we ever want to display him on the right hand side, he'll be facing the right way. And the cool thing is, so this will be flipped too, but we could easily edit this to be symmetrical, so it doesn't matter if it's flipped. Not that it would make a big difference anyway, it's just the lighting would be on the different side.
Right.
And then the last thing we would do is we would flip this guy so he's facing to the left anyway, because he's going to be on this side, so he'll be facing properly to the left once it's displayed in there.
Right.
So simply by doing that without adding any code, now we have it nice and elegantly so that we can have any character talking from any side whenever we want to now. And no additional memory usage, no additional code. It's just a matter of flipping it and flipping that boss portrait so that it properly displays again. Basically, we'll make all character portrait art facing to the right, and then it automatically gets flipped on this side. So I hope that makes sense, and I will run this one more time. So here I am, I'm ending this level, and I'm entering the boss arena. Nice fade in. Then we've got the dialogue. It comes in one letter at a time. Oops, look, there's an issue with the portrait because I flipped it. I'll have to, oh, I know exactly why. When I flipped that image, it flipped the anchor point for that particular image.
Right, yeah.
So you can see it fills in the text. We can make that as fast or as slow as we want. And there's never a word that is half on one line and half on the other because of that little tool I made. And then we're done, and I have control, and I can... Oh, look at that bug. Oh, I forgot I hadn't fixed that yet. That's awesome. What an awesome bug. I know why that's happening. It should be very easy to fix, but it's a very funny bug. That's actually why I didn't fix it. I forgot all about it, but I wanted to fix this last remaining bug on the video. All right, we are back. I paused for a second to figure out exactly what was causing that funny little bug, and I reused the debug text that I had put on screen here, and I had a feeling it was all about this variable called ready, and you'll see here, I knew it was related to the button press. But the button press is only supposed to work to move the dialogue or anything like that, and the HUD only if the value ready was 1. So we looked for something that was resetting, and you see here we set ready to 0 once all the text and stuff is done. So something was still resetting it, and so we just did a search for ready to find exactly what was setting it to 1. And I thought to myself, well, that shouldn't be possible. It should only be able to set ready to 1 if the length of the dialog box fill text was greater than the actual text that the string was displaying. And both were supposed to be completely cleared out at this point. So that made me realize, oh, it's probably not cleared out. Before that, I used the debug text to see if indeed ready was being set to 1 somehow. And sure enough, it was. So then my guess was, oh, I'll bet when all the dialogue is done, I probably didn't blank out the fill text in the dialog box, and that was the exact problem. So all I did was add this event. So we're basically clearing out all the dialogue-related variables in dialog box once the complete dialogue system is done. And with all of these set to blank or 0, then none of these events that are continuing the dialogue system will be met to make them do their thing. So that's what was causing the bug. So you'll see now that if I run it again from level 1, I'm going to miss it though, but it had to go. So here we go, first text. Also, probably in the next video or before we record the next video, I'll make it so long as each new string of text as it's coming in, so long as you're like 2 or 3 characters in, if you press the button, it'll fill it all in immediately, so you don't have to wait if you don't want to.
Right.
But for now, this is all the core functionality is really solid now, and we have a great system. And now, no bug. And now we can beat the crap out of Gumby here. But anyway, that will be it for this video. I forgot to fix that one silly issue with the here. So if we look here, you'll see its point is on the wrong side. So we just need that to be 0, 0. And that's why it was in a weird position. So let's just run that again. I didn't even notice the last time I showed the bug was fixed that Gumby Boss was off screen when his text was displaying. There he is. Properly on screen. Heroes properly on screen. And there we go.
Cool.
Alright, awesome. And yeah, like I said, everyone keep an eye out if you're Construct users, if you think that dictionary file creation system will be useful for you. I'm going to make that tool available free on the Construct forums. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks as always, Corey, for joining me for this video and all the beautiful art you continue to make. And that's it. Thanks everyone for watching.